Welcome back to CP's Garage. Today we are working on everyone's favorite F150 with that baby Powerstroke in it. This truck just rolled 100,000 miles. The owner is ready to do a timing belt before the 150K service. So we're going to start doing a timing belt on this bad boy. I don't know why everyone hates this truck so much when it comes to technicians. Because I don't. This thing is basically a 2000s engine stuck in a 2018 body. So here's what it looks like on top of it. Got airbox. We got that little baby Powerstroke turbo. This one does look like it has a small leak on the charged air cooler, but we're going to start taking this thing apart. We're going to take the airbox off first. Then we're going to take the degas bottle, followed by the fan shroud. Then once we do that, we'll be going after the fan, and then that'll open up the area to get to the timing belt, which is back here behind the tensioners. Back here behind the tensioners and the pulleys. We're also going to take off this Y and clean out any of the carbon that's in it. So first step is going to be draining the coolant, which we already started. You're going to need to use a hose because this thing points forward. You just use a flat blade. You just use a flat blade screwdriver on that red fitting right there. You put the hose on it and let it drain into the bucket. This thing will hold about 4 gallons of coolant. Alright, so we're going to start with the intake. I'm just going to pop the top, and then we're going to go over to the other side, way over there. We're going to come over here. We're going to take off this 7 milli. And we're going to take off this clamp, or this connector. Make sure there's nothing else. We got a twang right there. So we'll use our handy dandy clip tool to declip this right here. It looks like they got a zip tie right here, which we'll need to cut. All right, this should just lift up. You got a little grommet right here. Just kind of wiggle it out carefully without breaking it. May need to use some silicone spray to loosen it up. Silicone spray. Okay. There's a second twang that I didn't see because I'm blind. You'd think I am anyways. And of course, being Florida, it breaks. So, intake's off. Let's take the lower part of the intake off as well. Let's take the lower part off as well because we need to get this guy out of the way of the fan shroud. So that'll be a 13. Right there. Should be able to get this with a straight socket and not a wobbly. And got a couple twangs for wiring harnesses. we got a helper cat coming. Once you get that 13 out, it's just 2 push tabs on the bottom. Got a couple of clips right here as well that are easily popped up and flies in the air easily too, so be careful. And the intake comes out as a unit. We can see our global control module. You can see our degas bottle better. What we're going to do is we're just going to unclip it from the engine over there, unclip it from the radiator, and rotate it this way out of the way. We'll need 10mm for the 2 bolts up on top. And the bottom just clips in like that. Like that. We'll now use our handy dandy Icon pliers to come over here and take this guy off. And we'll actually just take it off from right here. Yeah, we'll take it off from down here because that tube has to come off as well. So we got that clip, we got that hose clamp off. We'll have to use our handy dandy needle noses to break it free. And it comes right off. Don't lose it, because sometimes it decides it wants to lock, which is very rarely. Then over here we'll do the same and use our handy dandy. And over here we'll use our handy dandy needle noses to pull this off. This one's not a fancy locking one, so you should be all right just leaving the clip, or leaving the clamp on it. All right, now you see how I have the degas bottle. I just kind of out of the way over there where it's not going to bother anybody for right now anyways. So now we'll focus on this radiator shroud. It's good habit just to put the bolts back where you had them, or have like a cupcake tray or the KFC to-go cups so you can put bolts in as you take them apart. So on this, we'll start with the glow plug module. Those are just 10mm. And get it out of the way. I'm sure you could probably just unplug it. I'm sure you probably could just unplug it and leave it there, but we'll just flip it out of the way. Put the bolts back in it. Try not to tamper with much. Don't like tampering with more than I have to. We can go after these guys right here and right here. Get the upper fan shroud off. This thing is still hot. Guy. So we'll go here and get this guy. Now we have this side pretty much loose. Now we got a couple of clips on the radiator that you gotta get off. Got a couple clips on the radiator shroud that we got to get off. Okay, that one was taped on. We're gonna have to retape it. And then we got 3 bolts over here, and we should have the upper shroud off. I'm gonna use a line extension so I'm not in the way of filming. But we've got one right there. And I got one right there. We got one right here. And these spaces are pretty tight, but manageable. So we should have all the bolts out now. This thing should just come right up. You'll have to fish it around the harness and everything, but oh yes, I forget. This has a fan on it that you'll need to take these bolts off. The F150 has an inner electrical fan that is attached to the upper shroud. All right, now that I got the fan off, that I forgot, this thing comes right up and out. As you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4 on this side. Next step is going to be getting this fan clutch off. On this, it's a 47mm or 1 7/8". At Freedom Racing, you can get this wrench for 50 or 60 bucks, and it'll fit your 6.7s, your 7.3s, your 3 liters, pretty much any Ford diesel. Most of the time these things will just come right off with a hammer. Sometimes they don't, so we'll see what this one's going to want to do. It may or may not come off. Remember, the cooling fan is left-handed thread. Is left-handed thread, so it's opposite of righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. So in this case, the fan, it needs to go towards the driver's side. Usually, you can give it a good whack with a hammer, and these things loosen up. But this one looks like it's gonna fight. Oh, I ended up having to go get a special tool for the fan clutch, because this one was just turning. So we'll see if this one from O'Reilly's actually works. All right, guys, I had to get creative, so I rented this tool from O'Reilly's, and this thing would not grab at all on the bolts because they use Torx external Torx bits on the pulley bolts, so you can't grab them like regular bolts. So I ended up putting two 6mm fender bolts from my Mustang in it, and there's two holes on the pulley down there. I will get a closer shot here in a second. And I was able to use my 48mm and this, and it was able to break it free. But boy, was that thing tight. This thing's either never been off, or whoever put it on last did not put any anti-seize on these things. I'm telling you right now, put anti-seize on your clutch fan. Do it. You will thank yourself later in the future when you have to take this thing off. So I'll thread this bad boy off now. You should be able to spin it right off. You have a connector and a bracket on here that you got to get off before, which I will show in a quick second as well. Alright, I said I was going to show you the fan clutch, so you can see it's loose now. Here is your connector right here. Unlike the 6.7, this does not have a jumper harness. So you got to pull out that little white clip, the safety tab. Then once you get that, you push it down. To make life a little bit easier, you're going to also want to take that bracket off. So what you're going to do, get a 10mm on the bolt. You can see it back there a little bit. And like a 6-inch extension. So it comes out to the fan, so you can actually work, not have to worry about it. Make sure your ratchet's on reverse and not forward, like mine is. Neutral, drop the ratchet. Bring the nut out almost to the end, so you can grab it and not drop it. So right there, we're gonna finger that off, pull the bracket loose so we can actually see this connector. You couldn't see it before, now you can. So we're gonna get that white safety tab pulled back, and once the white safety tab is pulled back, we will then disconnect the connector, and I will be right back after that. Alright, we got the white safety tab pulled out. Now we'll push down in the middle of the connector and it will smoothly come undone. We'll also take that twang off with our Christmas tree tool, courtesy of Lyle, link in the description. With that off, we can slowly spin this fan clutch off and drop it. So we got the fan clutch off. Next is going to be getting all these belts off so we can get these pulleys off. Next we'll be getting all these belts off because we do have to pull this pulley, that pulley, the tensioner, and the alternator. The reason we have to pull the alternator is to put the timing tool in the side of the block. The timing tool position is right behind the alternator, of course. They couldn't make it easy like Land Rover, where you just shove it into the crankshaft. These are a E12 for external Torx. Those are going to be the same. To remove this belt, you'll use a 1/2-inch ratchet in the 1/2-inch drive slot right there, and you'll spin this to the driver's side to loosen the belt, and the belt will slide right off. So we'll come back after I get the belt off, then we'll talk about the next one. Again, this one will go to the driver's side. There's no clip or anything like on the 6.7s where you can lock it in, so you'll have to just hold it and take the belt off. Of course, I'm using my awesome Icon tools that either you love or you hate. There's no in between. Now we're going to grab our EP12 and take off these bolts on the pulleys down here. I'm just using a 3/4 drive Milwaukee Impact, and they should come right out. That was easy. We'll take the water pump pulley off just to make room. Because, I mean, we're already in a tight enough spot. Now we gotta reach. Cool thing is, at least this truck doesn't require a water pump when you're doing the timing belt, because they're on back order, just like everything else. I do have a list of parts that I will throw in the description, both Land Rover and Ford parts. That list will probably change in the future as I find more parts that are Ford parts that Land Rover uses. I've been cross-referencing them with the engineering numbers on the physical part, so maybe we can get a good list of Land Rover and Ford crossover parts in case in the future that we can't get them from Ford. Take off this upper tensioner first. Looks to be about a 13 millimeter. I don't quite understand why these guys are pulling the cabs to do these things. Seems to be relatively open. I mean, yeah, it sucks leaning over. Yeah, it sucks leaning over the front of this thing, but it sure the hell beats taking all the time to take the cab off, in my opinion. We'll use a 10 millimeter on the AC tensioner. And these are captured with a washer to make life easier. A little strut. This one looks like it may need to be replaced in the future. We're getting closer and closer to this front cover. You can start to see it now. We'll have to take that crank pulley off. You don't have to take the center bolt off unless you're doing the oil pump. If you're doing the oil pump, you will have to take the center bolt out. But you wouldn't want to do that until you had the engine set up in top dead center. So we'll take that, pull it off down there. It looks to be a 10 millimeter on the bolts, and there's 6 of them. So if bolt's loose, you should be able to take it off. Now you can see that center bolt on the crank. You don't need to take that off if you're just doing the front belt. So next, we're going to move up here, and we're going to take off this crossover tube, and we're going to probably end up taking off this Y. Just give room for the camera and give room to be able to see what we're doing. Take off the KEC tube connector right here first. 7 millimeter flat blade, whichever you got. I had the flat blade handy, so we'll probably go back together with the 7 just to get it tight. That'll just be a wiggle, wiggle. There's a little oil in it, but that's to be expected, being it still has a crankcase. Oh wait, no it doesn't. Interesting. So we'll take this 10 millimeter off. That'll get the pipe loose. So to get this off, to get this bad boy off, you need to take that bolt out, that bolt down there, and then these 2 little guys right here for the EGR. We may have to take it off down there too, but we'll get to that point if we need to. Okay, so that's loose. I need a torque bit for the EGR. The EGR is a T30. Probably need a short extension for the bottom one. The customer did state the EGR was replaced 3 times on this thing, and he ended up getting fed up with it. So you know what happened. I don't even have to say what happened. So that should have, be, yep, the Y pipe's loose. We'll have to disconnect the map sensor. You have to get the safety tab, then get the, either push in the middle or get under the tab. Take the harness off. Real easy. Next step is to find the last bolt for this coolant crossover, and that is underneath, right about here. That is underneath right about in this area, and it feels to be a 10 millimeter. which I don't have on my extension, of course. We'll get under there, feel around for it. Found it. I was wrong. It wasn't a 10. It was an 8. Look at that. Look at that. The almighty Cody is wrong. Like normal. Not right very often. Nice long 8mm. That should make that pretty loose. And then it's just got a O-ring that's going to make it difficult to get off. It's got an O-ring that may make it difficult to get off, so we'll give it a little wiggle. There we go. She's loose. We'll get a pair of pliers now and get these hose clamps off. We also have a coolant sensor right here hiding that you don't want to miss. It's got one of those white locking tabs just like the map sensor. And it is on the pipe as well with a plastic twang. As you can see, these twang remover tools, or Christmas tree tool, is very important to have in your arsenal nowadays. Okay, so now that side's off. Need to get over here, get this side off. Then there's a little hose on the bottom that we have to get off as well. This is the hose I'm talking about. It's kind of a pain, but it is what it is. Here's our coolant sensor. Just a little white clip, pull up, push in, voila. We'll get that hose off. Then we'll have access to get off the Y pipe and access to the timing cover. Then we'll have a bunch of screws to take off for the timing cover. Not quite sure where the GoPro died, but we have got the Y out, the crossover tube halfway out. Probably gonna get the rest of the way out here in a second. But I want to show you what this Land Rover Ford engine does with EGR. Look at that nastiness. You think your 6.7s are bad? That is absolutely disgusting. And we're going to try to clean this out as best we can while this thing is apart. Unfortunately, I don't have an ultrasonic cleaner, so we'll have to just do what we can with hose and dish soap. So we'll clean this up. We'll get the GoPro battery changed, and we'll start hammering out that cover, because that is where we're at now. We're down to the timing cover, which in all rationality wasn't that bad except for the fan clutch. And when we go back together, I'll throw some grease on that so it comes off easier next time. We'll clean up the Ys as best we can. We'll clean up the sealing surface right there as best we can. Then we'll do our timing belt, which is the next pretty big step of this process. Unfortunately, we're not going to do an oil pump on this one. I was hoping we were going to be able to, but that'll be another truck. Crank seals are on national back order, but everyone else has the bolt and the oil pump. So without the crank seal, we're kind of SOL on that. So, all right, while the GoPro was off, I did take the liberty to disconnect this charge air cooler tube underneath the truck, because it's easier to get it out of the way. And it says to take it out in the workshop manual, so I'll show you the connector once I get it out. So you can just pull out through the top, but it just has a little clip that you pull out with a screwdriver, and it stays out when you get it out. This one's full of oil. I think the turbo may be going on this, because This looks like it has some kind of crankcase aftermarket thing going on it. So instead of taking the pipe off right there, instead of taking the hose clamp off right there, we're going to just take it off right there at the T right here. Make it easier on ourselves. And it looks like it's already been off on this clamp too, so. All right, now that we got that pipe off, we can pretty much see the front cover in all of its glory. Don't know how well you can see it, but it's there. And now we just have a butt ton of bolts to take off around this thing. I think there's like 16 in total. If I remember right, pretty sure it's 16. So I'm just gonna let you sit up there. They're all 8mm. So enjoy the show. So on this side, so over here at this timing cover radius on the bottom side of the radius, you'll have a bracket for this charge air cooler tube that goes from the turbo to the intercooler. You'll need to take off its 3 bolts. It's 2 nuts and a bolt. The bolt goes this way and the 2 nuts go this way. And they're 10mm for the nuts. And the bolt is an 8mm. I'm using a short extension and a deep 8 to get to it. Got it. You little devil, you. Alright, so that loosens up that bracket. It can now come out of the way of the timing belt cover. It looks like it would normally have a twang on it, but someone has zip tied the coolant hoses to it. So it no longer has its twang. No longer has its twang. Guess it's no longer country anymore. Well, this is getting really exciting. We're about halfway done with this timing belt. We just got to get this, fan clutch hub out of there. Get this thing up on TDC number 1. Get the alternator out so we can lock her in. Then we'll be pulling this belt. I mean, I don't really see why dealers are pulling the cab, other than maybe the timing belt in the rear, if they're actually doing that or not. I mean, this is a pretty straightforward job. I started this about 10 o'clock. Like, actually physically started tearing into it. Had some problems with the fan clutch, so I had to go to the store. So you gotta factor in 20 minutes of that time. I was at the freaking auto store. It is now 12 o'clock, so I have 2 hours into it. Warranty time on this is about 4 hours, if I remember right. And I'm also filming while I'm doing this, so it does take longer to do it while you're filming. And it looks like when they timed this thing, they maxed out the bolts. It says right in the workshop manual not to do that, but hey, we'll figure this out. We'll get it back together. We'll inspect the cover, see if the camshafts are leaking, because sometimes the cam seals will leak on these. Let's go over to the cover. What you want to do is flip it over and inspect around here and around here for wetness. And this one looks pretty dry, so the cam seals on this, I would say, are in good shape. I mean, it's at 100,000 miles, so it still has some life left in her. We'll clean that out, put the new seal in before we reinstall it. Oh yeah, we got our safety Crocs engaged on this job. Gotta wear the safety Crocs. Maybe that'll be his t-shirt, safety Crocs. But this thing looks just like a Land Rover when you pull it apart. The accessories are swapped, and the Land Rover also has a power steering pump, where this has an electric rack. So one less thing that it has to power. This is a Degas belt, as you can see by the Degas numbers. Land Rover is also a Degas belt. Believe it or not, if you go on Land Rover site, you can get the belt and tensioner and bolt all in one kit. Unlike Ford, where you have to buy everything individually. I currently have a list on a bunch of the 3-liter Facebook groups, and I'll have a list of parts needed to do this job, the rear belt, and the oil pump, if you so choose desired to do it. Ford definitely recommends it at 150K when you do the belts. You're in here, the pump is kind of known on these Lion 6-cylinder motors, even the older stuff. You'll get a nice tick on startup for about 4 or 5 seconds before it can get oil pressure up to the top end. That's pretty much the only giveaway, other than maybe a low pressure light, which at that point is almost too late. I wish we could get rid of these pumps that have these control solenoids on them and use the old style pump that's just full pressure all the time. But fortunately, they changed the pump when they went to the Gen 2 Lions from the Gen 1s. Trust me, I've looked, and if someone else knows what you can do to change that over, let me know, because I think I'd be interested in doing it. Yeah, I'm going to take a break, clean up, and then set this thing on top dead center. And we'll come back and look at the tools that are needed, or that you should use anyways. Some people don't use them, some people do. I personally recommend at least using the 3 main timing tools if you're going to do this. It's not worth doing this and messing up and having to spend $8,000 on a long block from Ford, because you will destroy the top end if you don't. Alright, so let's get back to it. I took a break. I needed it. I need to get some water. So let's take this fan clutch. Let's take this fan clutch pulley off. It's held on by 3 15mm. Of course, you can get to 2 of them, but the 3rd one you can't get to. Come on, Ford, do better. As LR Times YouTube channel would say, this is not a Toyota, so that's probably why. Well, darn, this one ain't coming off. Guess we're gonna have to break it free with the ratchet first, with our lovely icon. That also is another topic of hate. Which I don't understand it. Now, let's get this engine up to top dead center. We're gonna need to get a socket for that though. That is a 21mm, if you're wondering. Alright, now that we got our 21mm on there, we get to rotate this thing clockwise only, according to the workshop manual. Do not rotate any other way. So we'll crawl down in here and we'll rotate us to top dead center. This belt is already losing it. There's a nice strip of rubber on both of the idler pulleys. But we're going around, going around, going around. Getting pretty close. So here's the three tools you're gonna need. You need the two cam locking pins, and there's the part number. I'll also throw it in the link, or I'll throw it in the description. And you're gonna need this one. This one goes in the side of the block and locks the crankshaft in. But we're first gonna get the cams lined up. We're gonna get the cams lined up first, take the alternator down so we can get to the plug for this. Then we'll put this in and make sure the crank is butted up right to it. Don't forget to take this out once you're done, because you'll destroy something if you don't. There's part number. You could also make this out of a bolt if you wanted. You could turn it down here to this dimension. Supposedly people use drill bits for this, but since I'm making you guys a video, I am going to do it with the proper tools. But at least you know the proper way of doing it first. Then you can decide on how you're going to go about it, or if you're not going to go about it. So right there should be top dead center number 1. We'll throw the other pin in. See, I guess we'll just throw it on the ground first. I mean, that's a good idea, right? All right, now that we've retrieved the pin from the ground, it slides into its timing hole as well. So this thing's in time. Surprise, surprise. We can verify that by using the cell phone and the camera. So we'll do that real quick. Show you what the timing holes look like. So right in there, straight through, you'll see the hole. That bad boy just slides in there. It's on that one's on the little tight side, if you ask me, but this one is a little bit looser. Now that we got the crank where we want it, we can start working on this alternator. It should be relatively easy now that we can at least see it now. What is that, about 15mm? It looks like a 15mm. Nope, 15. Alrighty. Unlike Land Rover, we have this nice metal pipe coming out of the side of the block. Those guys, they use a lot of plastic. Kind of feel bad for them. Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to disconnect this battery. And the guy's going to lose his presets. So I don't feel like frying a module today. Not on my list of things to do. Unlike the Super Duties, this only has one battery in it. And it sounds like we have a not so happy child in the house. Move my little step ladder over so I can reach, because I am short. And we're just gonna break these things loose. There's 3 of them, 2 on the top, 1 on the bottom. It's a tight fit down there, but it looks like we should be able to maneuver this thing forward and out of the way. We should be able to maneuver this thing forward and out of the way. I'm hoping. After I was rudely interrupted. Well, nope, the twangs are on the bracket, so we should be good there. Bolt number 2. All right, let's see if I can get a good picture of this. Turn the flashlight on the camera, and there we are. We're installed all the way down to the block. It's kind of hard to see, but that thing is down in there deep, and it is one of those things where you just got 2 fingers on it trying to spin it in. It's hard. It's probably one of those things where if you made your own with the bolt head on it, it'd be a lot easier to do. If you want dimensions, I could get them off of this for you, or you could go to LR Time on Patreon and become a Patreon member for them. He has dimensions on making one of these. So now we'll get the ratchet and make sure this thing's always all the way butted up against it. We'll take these out because we don't want to bend those. And that crank is not going anywhere. I mean, we could back it up and confirm that. See, it moved. You can see that it moved. So we'll flip it up and go to forward. And you can see we stopped. We're all the way in place. Top dead center number 1. Next thing we need to do is throw our timing pins back in, confirm that they're loose, they're installed, and is not wanting to play nice. This one went right in. So that cam is technically a little out of time. And that's from the factory. So I'm just going to put this on top dead center on the pin. Then I'll do the cam timing once I loosen up the bolts and take the belt off, because it's not really in time. And I don't want to bend my timing tools. It's slightly out of time from the factory. Go forward. So now we'll loosen the tensioner. The belt should basically loosen itself at that point. And it is, looks like a 17. That's a weird size. Weird size for Ford anyways. No going back now. Belt's loose. Get the ratchet and take this the rest of the way off. Get the impact and take this the rest of the way off. Doesn't look like they had any Loctite on it though. This is a bolt that you have to replace no matter what. Look at the gross grubbies in there. She's been around the block a couple times. Belt off. There's part number, Deco. Probably Land Rover number. I don't see any cracks or anything in it. Oh. These new belts, oh, there's a little bit of cracking in them. Not much, but a little bit. It's a good time to change it. We'll need the 13 again for the 2 idler pulleys. These technically don't need changed, but it's a good thing to do while you're there. We're going to replace the bolts. Now we're going to loosen the outside cam bolts. These guys. On both sides. Doing this allows you to time the engine without having any troubles, which is pretty cool. That is actually thought of to do it that way. Make sure you use a backup wrench so you don't spin the cam gear. You don't have anything in there holding it. But now your cam gears should go back and forth. Ford, per the workshop manual, wants you to center these. So now you put your timing pins in. Use your ratchet to time to do some brake clean mafia stuff. We had a bunch of rust, dust in here, so I want to clean it up as good as we can. Get the gears clean, get the block clean. That gear was out of time a little bit, so workshop manual says to make sure I have the pins in before removing the tensioner, but unfortunately that was not really possible for this one. I could have one pin in, but not the other. Not without putting some stress on my pins, and I don't want to have to buy more pins. They're 20 bucks, they're like 30 bucks just for the pins. So it's so the pins are in, pins in, pin down there is in. I'm gonna open the bolts, get the idlers on, get the tensioner set on there. We got the cam gears loose, and we'll center those so when we put the belt on and tension it, they can go wherever it needs to go. I'll come back once I have the idlers on. It's 20 Newton meters first. Maybe I can get on here and do this one-handed. Once you achieve 20 newtons or 177 inch-pounds, you then do another 45 degrees, which I am not going to be able to do on camera while holding the phone and trying to do this. So I'll be right back. Alright, we muscled those in. Now it's time to get the tensioner in there so we can rerun this belt and get this timing done. I'm kind of excited now. Getting closer and closer. Going back all the way together. Now I'm installing the tensioner. The workshop manual says finger tight. I have the Allen key marked straight down like in the workshop manual, and that's how it's going to be. Now we can install the new belt. Just wash my hands, and now we're going to install this belt. It is in fact another Deco belt. As you can see right there, and it has arrows of the directions. I personally like clean hands when putting on timing belts. That's just my personal preference, but these belts are important and you should treat them as such. So I'm going to run it from the driver's side over to the passenger and then back down to the crank. You want to have these cams centered in the sprocket when you do this. You'll also want to find like a rubber band or something to hold this crank, hold the belt on the crank. So what you can do to hold this belt is throw a roll of electrical tape underneath the crankshaft pulley. Then the belt will not come off the pulley. Just don't forget to take that piece, just don't forget to take that tape out. All right, we have the new belt in. We started it at the crank pulley. We threw a roll of electrical tape on underneath of it between the oil pump and the pulley to hold the belt. Then we went over this idler. We somewhat centered this and grabbed the next tooth with a top belt, and that's where it ended up. We hit this idler, then we hit this gear at the next tooth, just like this one over here. Then we went past the tensioner and back down and around. That's all there is to routing the belt. Now it's time to tighten the tensioner. That should be fun. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it one hand and show you guys 100%. I don't have a camera guy today, or camera girl. But the belt's going in the right direction. Everything looks to be all right. It's just time to tension it and do the 1 7/8 rotation. Put the pins back in. Put the lower pin in first. Then once it hits, make sure the upper pins go in, which they should. So here's what we gotta do to tension this thing. We've got to bring a little square notch that's back there into this window. When we do, we have to torque bolt to 20 Newton meters. Then verify that the notch is still in the window. So I'm going to do that and we'll be right back. Alright, so we torqued it up and our notch is not in the window. So guess what we get to do? We get to do it all over again. Let's check it again and see what we got. This time our notch is in the window. You can see the notch. Maybe. Yeah, you can see the notch back there, and it's in our window. Looking straight on, it looks like it's perfect. Now that we're tightened to 20 Newton meters, just like the idlers, we'll torque that another 45 degrees to yield. So I'll do that off camera since I don't have anyone to hold the camera. There it is, torque to yield. And it looks like we're still perfect on the notch. So I guess it's time for what we all been waiting for, to pull the pins and see what we got. I noticed one side was really tight and one side I could pull out just willy-nilly. So the side that was really tight, I took an 18 and bumped the camshaft. I took the 18 right here and bumped the camshaft until this thing was loose before I tightened these. But after, so what I did was I tensioned it all up, and the side that was tight, which happened to be this side, it's not tight now because I figured out what was going on. But when I was tensioning it and torquing it, this cam would move. The cam itself would move and get tight on the dowel, on the pin. So what I did, and it doesn't say anything about it in the workshop manual, is bumped that cam gear back and forth. I bumped that cam bolt, right here at 18mm, back and forth until this guy was loose. Then this guy was loose, so I didn't have to do nothing but torque down the bolts to 23 Newton meters. So the tensioner is torqued again. We're on top dead center. Our cam gear is ready to have the pins pulled, and we're ready to pull the crank pin again. So we're going to do this again, and I will show all my mistakes. It is off by a hair of a hair, and I didn't notice it. So that's my fault, but hey, we live and learn. We're all human. And luckily, it's not so far off that it's going to damage anything. So, I mean, it was basically the same way when we took it apart. That gear was technically out of time, but just barely. That's what was happening to this side. But I was able to fix it before I tightened those 3 sprocket bolts. So let me pull the crank gear, then I'll come back and pull the cam gears, and you'll watch me turn this thing over. Crank pin out for the second time. So let's pull out those cam pins. Ejecto cedo cuz, and ejecto cedo cuz. This side's a little harder with the AC lines in the way, but manageable. Okay, let's crank this thing over. There's one revolution. You can see the cams are coming around. Cam pin holes anyways. All right, we need to get our locking pin back in. Locking pin. I'll be right back. All right, we got the pin in. We're locked solid on it. Now let's grab our pins. Timing pins for the camshaft. Right in like it should. Woohoo! Let's go to the other side. Right in like it should. So our timing pins are in, all 3 of them. We are officially timed. All right, after that interruption, let's check your tensioner. And it looks to be right in the center. Out of everything on this timing belt job, I will say getting that perfect after 2 revolutions of the motor is the hardest of it all, honestly. Again, use the center crank bolt to loosen up the pins on each side before tightening those. That makes a world of difference. Makes a world of difference when you spin it over and try to put the pins back in. It's a little tip that I got for you guys, but other than that, we're going to put this thing back together again. I'm going to start by putting the pin in putting the plug for the pin back in the side of the block, put the alternator back on. I'm just going to kind of do reverse of what I did to take this thing apart. It's gone from sun overhead to sun behind trees. I had to step away from it after the second time, I think. But hey, we got it. It's gonna run good again. And this one is just one of those that fought. I've never had this much trouble with one before, but it wanted to fight, so it got its fight. I gotta hurry up and get this thing done now. Alright, we're pulling the gasket. We're getting close. We are getting close. Gonna put that bolt back in. That one over there too. Installing new gaskets. Clip. It's kind of nice that there's locating pins in it, so you don't stretch it too much. I like when you're installing new parts. It means you're almost done. Installing a gasket one-handed is pretty hard. So I'll be right back. Reinstalled bolts through the gasket like they were before. C and C. So this guy's ready to go back on. We got this pile of parts and this pile of parts. We got a new charge air cooler tube put on. We're getting pretty close. We'll put the fan pulley on next. Then we'll get to the cover, and then we'll probably do the charge air cooler tube. Then we'll probably do the charge air cooler tube before we get in here, because all the stuff will be in the way. Alright, so we have that loosely mounted in. Now we're going to torque it to 80 Newton meters. Sorry guys, I'm using Newton meters. They're easier to use on the torque wrench. I'll put all the torque specs in the description, or maybe I'll figure out how to put a PDF in the description so you guys can have the full PDF. So we'll torque these. I'll come back. We'll do the front cover. I'll get the GoPro up and going again. I just forgot. This thing beat me today. Not very many of these 3 liters beat me, but every now and again I get one that just doesn't want to play nice, and this was it. Alright, so we got the timing cover back on. Now it's time to take off this charge air cooler tube that's buried under there. It goes all the way down there. Whole belt. So this it's got 2 clips. Clip on one end, clip on the other. Get a screwdriver or something, pry it down. Voila, it's done. Then it has that one bolt that we took off earlier to get access to the bracket and the bolts. New charge air cooler pipe is installed. I just accessed it through the little cover right here. Got down here, got the clips from down there. Then was able to squeeze it up through there with the radiator shroud, and it'll be moved. Next, I'm going to tighten up those pulleys. Put the tensioner on. I'm going to put that bracket back on. Put the bottom pulley on. Put the other tensioner back on. Start getting this thing closer to being finished. Put that coolant pipe back on. Get the EGR hooked back up, even though it looks like it's not doing anything. But what do you guys think about that? Look at that CCV reroute. Looks like it's going through a filter down underneath. But I don't know. It's different, because I was going to pull this tube off, but then I was realizing, I'm not going to mess with that. I don't want to mess with it. So I ended up just working around the intake tube. But yeah, this thing's going pretty smoothly now. It had a rough time on that timing belt, but hey, there's always that one that wants to fight. moving right along. I am to putting the fan pulley back on. As you can see, we have lost light, so the Milwaukee light bar is coming in clutch tonight. But I wanted you guys to see this, so you guys believe that I actually do this. So I have some Motorcraft high temp nickel anti-seize. We're just gonna put a little Dabadooya on it, and that's it. I mean, that's all you really need. After you thread it on, it'll be fine. But don't look at me right now, because now I'm officially the Tin Man. I am covered in anti-seize with that one little drop. So I'll come back once we get this thing all back together and start and fill out coolant and starting it. Well, the 3 liter is complete. It is running. It is making some noise from there as normal. But we topped off the coolant. Truck runs good. Started right up. No DTCs. We went out and test drove it. Things runs great. So, if you guys need your timing belt done, now you know how to do it. Or if you don't want to do it yourself, bring it over to me and I will do it. So, until next week, make sure you like, subscribe, share.